So, back to climate change. Um, Really, we're to the point where the subject of climate change is a subject of social science, not physical science, right? The physical science is well known, well understood. There's billions of pieces of data to support the thesis that the climate is changing, it is getting warmer, and it's due to human activity. So I don't really think there's a lot of disagreement in the scientific community about that. So the question is, why didn't everybody accept that? And now we're getting into social science. But there was an article that came out this week in the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society that I really think does the best job of graphically trying to explain the story in a picture. And I'm going to go through it here in a second. And I'm going to take a step back and say, a lot of people don't like to talk about climate change because they're told it's all a Chinese hoax or the data is not right, and that there's an element of university people and academics wanting to get their research funded, so they have a bias. And I would say there is from time to time a bias, and on the part of the scientific community about various things, and we certainly saw it happen in physics with quantum mechanics and other areas. A famous physicist wrote a book about it called Fashion and Science. Roger Penrose, very famous Nobel Award-winning British physicist. So it's not fake. And then we hear, the data was touched by a human, and it might be wrong. Well, okay, there's actually a pretty well-known physicist called Mueller, who was at the University of California, Berkeley, and he thought the same thing. So I do think it's important for people who, like 99% of all scientists do, believe in climate change, to really be pretty self-aware that a lot of the population doesn't believe it because they're told they don't need to believe it. They don't want to believe it from a philosophical standpoint. If I believe that, then I need to change my behavior. Then we need rules, and the government needs to tell people what to do. And I don't want any of that. And the other kind of very interesting observation I have on this matter was there's a physicist who wrote a book called Unsettled, and he then went on and his claim was, yes, the climate's changing, but don't worry about it. And I've wanted to write a book review on that book for a long time, maybe I will. But my point is, he then went on a lecture tour, and they had these series of debates where there's a climate scientist that thought we should do something about it, and he took the other side, no, we shouldn't do anything about it. It's very skilled, very professional guy. Had been the provost of Caltech. Knew a lot about how to critique other people's scientific work, and kind of his observation was, I see a lot of these scientific papers, and I wouldn't have given that guy the PhD at Caltech. Well, that doesn't mean everything's not correct, and every year more information becomes known and more data becomes available, and it continues to support the proposition we got a problem. So and he goes on these things, and they'll take a poll in advance of this debate, and they'll say how many people believe in climate change. 60% say yes, 40% say no. They'll have the debate, and how many people believe in climate change? 40% of the people say yes, and 60% of the people say no. It's just because this guy's a really good, skilled debater and carried the day. And the other thing is, people don't want to believe. They want to believe that we don't need to worry about climate change. We don't need to do anything about it. And we don't have to have the government involved in any of this stuff. Although I would observe the government's heavily involved in energy policy and all these things anyway. It's just, there's really no option to not have the government involved. It's just, but philosophically, people don't want that. I get it. And so it's important when having this conversation that I don't say, hey, that you must be a moron. Because first of all, people aren't morons. There are very smart people out there, very well-educated people out there that really kind of haven't looked into it, I guess, closely enough to have a philosophical bias themselves, to the extent where they just don't believe it. They're not dumb. They're not educated, and many of them are very well educated and quite bright. So I think that I think this really is a challenging communication story. And so when I read this, I don't know how I happened on this study. I must have come in my email or something. But I'm just going to show you the money shot. Just as like this picture just sums it all up in one picture, and the conclusion is really undeniable. So this is a stripe of blue is cold. This is at sea level. Blue is cold. Less blue is less cold. Red is hot. Well, what's happened here over time? In the olden days, it was cold. Now it's hot. So all the hottest years in the history of certainly human existence have all piled up back here in the last couple of years. In fact, the probability of this time series being natural distribution, like a bell curve, if you will, is 10,000 trillion to 1. So there's a 10,000 trillion to 1 probability that you could get this distribution if it was just natural variation. Yeah, that's not really very good odds, is it? But the thing that these climate stripes are available. You can get them online, just stripes. Just go Google climate stripes. You can get it for your backyard if you want to. And this is the global presentation, but it doesn't matter. You can look at the North American or USA or New York or Florida or whatever. They fundamentally all say the same thing, which was colder, got hot. And I always was wondering when people complain about these climate models, like, it's the model, the model can't possibly break. Like, what are these people going to do when it's no longer about the model and the world just gets warmer? And so they have answers to that. And I try to kind of stay away from going tit for tat because, first of all, it was the models. Well, now, the models, I don't know, seem to have been fairly validated. There's actually studies about that go back and look at the validation of the models. The models, if anything, people were worried about the models being too, not, underestimating the degree of climate change, because this actually is a rate of change that is greater than many of the models would have predicted. But the real kind of value of this chart is now we're going up in the atmosphere. So this is in space. Because at some point in time, we put satellites in space and we could measure the temperature in space. We could measure the temperature at the Earth. And you see, it was warmed down, it was cooled down here because the heat was escaping. It was leaving the atmosphere and going up into the upper atmosphere, stratosphere, if you will. Well, then all of a sudden the heat had a hard time getting out. And now the heat's not getting out. It's colder up in the upper atmosphere. And it's warmer in the lower atmosphere. Because right in here, there's a layer. The climate change layer. That's where the man-made CO2 resides, right there. And so there's a blanket, and above the blanket, it's kind of cold because the heat didn't escape. And below the blanket, it's kind of warm because the heat's under the blanket. And this is in one slide exactly what's going on. And the reason I like talking about the data is because we don't need to talk about models. We don't need to talk about, don't you know, the parts per million isn't really that many, it's really pretty thin layer, and don't you know, all the don't you knows. And we're just left with the data, both the data at the surface of the Earth and the data in the upper atmosphere. And, now we just have to defend the data. Is this data right? Did this guy manipulate the data just to have this outcome? Well, I have a couple observations. One, the raw data is available. So if you're so interested, just go download the satellite data and tell me what your own stripe looks like. People don't do that because, of course, they would come up with the same answer. so they don't really, they question the data. Couldn't the data be wrong? Well, of course the data could be wrong, but data is available online. Go get it yourself and tell me what's wrong with it. And that's exactly what this guy, Dr. Mueller, did at Berkeley Earth. So he's like, maybe I don't believe in all this data. And he went and got a grant from somebody was perfectly happy to give money to someone that challenged the climate change thesis. And sure enough, when he did his own data, he was so impressed by his own data and how his own data and his own data analysis came to the exact same conclusion as everybody else. He was very surprised, actually, when that happened. And he was so surprised he made a web page about it, and it's still up. You can still get it. They still publish information, berkeleyearth.org. And so this about the team. Let's just go look and see who the team is here. This is his daughter, actually. That's his daughter, director of strategy. So of course the founding doctor here, I know he's alive, but he's retired. He's Richard Mueller, the co-founder and board director emeritus. But that's what this guy said. He said, "Hey, listen, I don't believe the data. I'm going to go get the data myself. I'm going to do my own analysis." Well, he came to the exact same conclusion. So when we talk about global warming, he publishes his own update, and the update's not good. Like, see all that red stuff? That's like, it shouldn't be there. It didn't used to be there. And so people are worried that we're going to blow through these limits. Well, of course we are. Obviously, we're going to blow through the limits. We haven't done enough about it yet because we're still arguing about whether we should do something about it. But 2024 was the warmest year 2024 is the warmest year on Earth since direct observations began. The warmest year. That's like, so the whole idea here is to not have global warming. So 2024 was the most warm year. So that's like going in the wrong direction. And in fact, some of these years were really alarmingly warm, and warmer than many of the models would have predicted. So I just want to update this, and none. I've commented on all of this before, but I've never really seen these warming stripes that go down into the ocean. So let's. I didn't really go into that. So back over here. Here's the surface, and the ocean was cold. It was cold. No, the ocean's hot. So we've sunk a lot of heat into the ocean, which has all sorts of impacts of itself. I won't bore you with all that. On the surface, it was cold. Now it's hot. But here's this magic layer where the lower stratosphere has the layer of the CO2 and methane and whatever else up there causing the climate to change. But it's very dramatic, right? And I will post the link to this this article in BAMS, the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, because it's really the money shot. It's just like that plus, oh, don't you know, the data actually has been validated by a data skeptic, and that's the Berkeley Earth stuff. But I just hear more and more, like we've lost ground in the 20 years or so since I've been interested in something like this. We've lost ground in public awareness and acceptance of this climate change issue. It should not be a political issue. Where the Earth, I don't think Democrats warm the Earth. I don't think Republicans warm the Earth. I think humans in the United States, in China, all humans have contributed to this activity that's caused climate change. So I'm not quite sure why it's become a political issue, even a political litmus test issue. Nikki Haley was for climate change. There are a lot of prominent Republicans that have supported climate change. The first Trump administration, he set this poor guy down there to be the head of NASA. And he's like, oh, there can't be, climate change is a Chinese hoax. He gets down to NASA with all these PhDs and like, hey, just letting you know, climate change is actually not fake. And he changed his mind, actually. So it isn't a politically driven phenomenon. It's not Biden's fault or Obama's fault or Trump's fault or anybody's fault, right? So you'd think we could just look at the facts objectively as a group, as people, and kind of come to the natural conclusion. But these biases and the politics of it. I mean, I think Al Gore did more to not help the climate issue than anybody in the history. Because he politicized the whole thing and told us all we were morons for being Republicans, and we were morons for not listening to him on climate change. And like, in order to actually make progress on this issue, we need to have Republicans and Democrats have a kind of generate some consensus and have some conversations based in facts. Everybody needs to bring their facts to a meeting and put them on the table, because the facts are climate change friends. And so somehow we got to de-escalate the politicization of the issue, because we have definitely gone backwards on this. It's kind of funny. Like, it's spent time in rural America in the wind farm or solar business talking to farmers. Now, one thing a farmer knows is that his climate has changed. Like, he plants 3 weeks earlier than he used to, and the rain comes at a different time than it used to, and it's warmer longer than it used to, and weeds grow differently than they used to. Like, they know this. They live outside. They're farmers, and they are completely attuned to what's going on in their land. But 20 years ago, I'd do a poll, and they'd all realize that there was climate change. There really wasn't that piece of the argument wasn't much to talk about. You do the same poll now, and it's going to, it's just going to mimic the national political perspectives. And so, hats off to the people who wrote this Stripes. Like, there's nothing groundbreaking. There's no new physics. There's no Nobel Prize here in these Stripes, right? It's just kind of a clever way to graphically describe data that exists for a long time. But I think the groundbreaking piece of it is there's just no way to explain away this data without coming to the obvious conclusion that it's being driven by climate change. And and that we probably should do something about it. Why not? Like, everybody thinks the cost to do something about climate change is just too expensive. In reality, the opposite's true. Reinvesting in brand new energy infrastructure improves our national economic efficiency and energy. It doesn't make it worse, right? We're investing in new, better, modern stuff and turning old, crappy, not working out very well stuff off. So no, it actually there's not a negative cost to redoing our power system. In Texas this year, it's a good case study because the electrical grid in Texas isn't very well connected to the rest of the country. And so you can kind of, it's a little laboratory. Well, 40% of their electricity will be produced by renewables in 2025. 40%. And so yeah, they don't love climate change in Texas. They don't love environmental rules, I can assure you. And they're probably like really surprised that 40% of their power comes from wind and solar. But it does, and it does because it's the cheapest, the least expensive resource to have supplied the growing load demand that is in Texas. It's a growing state with a growing economy. It needed a lot of new power plants, and it got them, and they all go round and round in the sky, or they're sitting on the ground in their solar plants. So I encourage folks to download this article. It's not political. It's not going to win a Nobel Prize, but it is going to graphically display the numbers and the facts, and because that's the real way to facilitate consensus on this, right? Like, let's at least agree to the facts, and let's lay the facts out in a drawing, and let's let the facts go where they go, so we don't have to believe in some egghead supercomputer code who none of us understand, and none of us understand the computer. We don't understand the code, and we don't understand what the guy's saying when he's telling us what his computer said. So it's just like, so that didn't work. so we ended up where we are now, which is there's debate and controversy. People yell at me when I make the seemingly rational observation that the Earth is getting warmer. I hear back it must be the scientists jury rigging the data. It's just not. And again, the data is available online. So if you think the scientists are jury rigging the data, go look at it yourself. And that's exactly what Dr. Mueller did. Spent the rest of his career on the pro doing something about climate change side of the argument. He'd switch sides. I hope people found this interesting, and I hope people download this this article. It really is worth putting. It really is a good mechanism just to put the facts on the table.